sheet. It's a timing tool. So we can use it to adjust the timing of a performance. In this case, we'll go ahead and use it to adjust the pitch controls timing. Let's go to make it a little bit more exciting. Let me go ahead and show you a few things we can do with the dope sheet. So with that object selected, we can now go ahead and right click and access the dope sheet from our context menu, or another way is to do so from the graph editors menu. It's second from the top. Alright, sweet. So once this loads in, let me go ahead and show you this. It's a really important feature. Under the show menu, make sure to go to auto expand and then check animated. That way you get right to all of your animated properties. So go ahead and uncheck that just to show you it's going to hide a lot of stuff. So just go ahead and jump back and make sure animated is on. And that way you can focus on each of your rotate channels separately instead of as a whole. What we saw before was a result of the summary. So if we're to go ahead and turn that off, here we see all of the keys on every frame, whereas when we go ahead and turn on animated, not only do we see our keys, of course, but we see them for each separate track. So sometimes you want to make an overall change, and you can use the summary for that. That's the top list. But then if you want to go on an individual basis and kind of offset your keys by simply left-clicking and dragging, you want to make sure animated is on so you can expand your animated tracks. Alright, sweet. Now, something else to keep in mind under show is that auto select should also be set to animated, and it should be by default, but this is going to automatically grab those animated tracks for you. Great. Alright, sweet. So what are some things we can do here? Well, we already learned how to move our keys. We could also remove them by hitting the delete key. But let's go ahead and talk about something a little bit more exciting. How can we scale our keys? Well, watch this. And notice that we have a tool called Edit Ranges. And you can see how that's going to change the display of our keys. So now what we have here are these bars that we can use to slide our timing around. So as I start to do that, let me go ahead and show you what changes in the animation. So to kind of slide that around, and now the turret's going to look up faster. Or if you wanted to, you can go ahead and scale your timing. So you can go ahead and move to the very end of your bar and go to the one at the top. Remember, this is your summary, or your keys overall, and you can start to take this end handle and pull that closer to your start handle, and that's going to speed up your timing. So watch this. If I were to go ahead and play the animation back, you'll notice that the turret is going to look up a little bit faster. Then the animation will also stop faster as a result. So that's a really cool feature I enjoy using. And you might have saw that same type of display underneath my track bar. If I were to go ahead and grab a group of keys, well, here's that same Edit Ranges type of display. Now, I can access this by simply right-clicking on the track bar, heading over to Configure and choosing Selection Range. So do keep that in mind. Selection Range and Edit Ranges, well, they're one and the same. It's only that with the Selection Range, well, we can access that feature right here from the track bar. We don't have to jump to the dope sheet. Sweet. So that's basically how the dope sheet works. Now let me go and show you something really neat, something I think you'll enjoy before we end this lesson. So it's very easy to actually reverse animation here in 3ds Max. I'll go ahead and turn off Edit Ranges mode by simply moving to, let's say, Move Keys mode. Next, let's go ahead and grab Select Time, so we can go ahead and grab the keyframes that we would like to reverse. From there, we can go ahead and left-click and drag to select them. And now watch this. We can work with Reverse Time to flip the timing of our keys. So watch this. If I were to go ahead and close this out, you'll notice that the turret is going to start by looking upward, and then it will point down. How neat is that? So if you need to quickly animate, let's say, your character walking backwards, you can start by using Reverse Time. You can grab your keys and flip your timing, and then you'd make minor changes here and there to polish the performance. But that's just another idea of how to use the Reverse Time tool. Neat stuff. So in this lesson, we learn how to work with the dope because it allows us to take our work from good to amazing. It gives us so much control over our keyframes. Let's go ahead and have a look at this curve editor. So we'll go ahead and grab our swivel control at the center of the turret. Let's go ahead and right click, and we can now choose the curve editor from our context menu, or we can go to the graph editors menu at the top and choose it. Sweet. What we have here over to our right is our work area that shows us our keyframes, our function curves, how we transition between each keyframe. And then notice when we select the key, we have access to its tangency. So you'll notice that if we were to left click and drag on our tangent, we're able to adjust our timing, adjust our poses without having to add any extra keys. So normally what I like to do after blocking in an animation is I like to see how far I can get with the tangents. And then if I absolutely need another key, I'll go ahead and add it at that point. That way we can keep things clean as much as possible. The last thing you want to do is create a key everywhere, and then when you jump into the curve editor, when it's time to clean things up, well then that's when you realize the error in working such a way. Cool, so this is our work area. We can go to middle click to pan, hold down Control Alt, and drag with the middle mouse button. And what we get is more of an interactive zoom, which is great because sometimes we have to zoom in really close to a function curve to fix a problem that might not be noticeable from further away. So we can use this interactive zooming to get to those issues, those subtle changes that we have to make. Sweet. Then from there, you'll notice that underneath the show menu, of course, we can go ahead and view our animated tracks by making sure animated is on underneath auto expand and auto select. That way they load up right here in our channels list, also known as our animated tracks. All right, fantastic. So if we wanted to focus on the position Y track of the turret, we can go ahead and grab that. And now we're able to see only its keyframes. And this is something I really love because now we can just go ahead and focus on this channel without any other distractions. And let's go ahead and see what's happening in the position Z right now. That's our up and down axis. So if we were to go ahead and hit play, you'll notice that we have some pretty good weight and it kind of falls quickly. What if we wanted to slow this down? Well, we can start to take our keys and drag them. And what's great is that as we left click and drag, not only do we see the time that the key will rest on, but we'll also see the amount of offset that we've created by simply looking at the key's properties right there in our curve editor. So thank you 3ds Max for that. Also, something to keep in mind is our key stats at the top. So we have access to a key's frame and value from here. And you could also use simple math to make changes. So for example, if we wanted to move this 3 more frames down, we can go to our frame stat and type in n plus 3, hit enter. There you go, now we're on frame 32. Sweet. I'll go ahead and undo back though. Let's go ahead and bring the key back because I'd like to show you another way we can go ahead and stretch our timing. This way is not too practical. Instead, what we can do is work with the retime tool. So this will create anchors that we can use to start kind of stretching our timing. Let's go ahead and create an anchor at the beginning of the animation by simply double clicking. And then we'll create one at the end by again double clicking. Alright, sweet. So watch this. We can now go ahead and start to drag our timing. It's not going to update our timing until we choose bake to save these changes. Now if you don't quite like the anchor, you could always just go ahead and trash it. Notice this X at the bottom. Once we click on it, it'll revert back to where it was before we bake. Now with just one anchor, it's going to slide all keys, so do keep that in mind. We'll probably want to create one more, and then go ahead and stretch our timing, go ahead and bake it, and there you have it. Now you might notice that a few of our keys aren't displaying as the others are. You can see some have a wider display, and others, they almost appear to be squished. When we see keys like this, that basically means that we have keys in between frames. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes we want those kind of keys if we're trying to create something that's very subtle change in our performance. But oftentimes it can be a bit challenging to work with keys like that because you don't quite know exactly where they are. So what you could do then is go ahead and grab a key and simply go ahead and move it to a whole frame. You'll notice that 3ds Max by default will go ahead and snap that keyframe to the next whole frame. Cool, so you might find that to be super helpful. Now once you're done with the retime tool, just go ahead and close it out. And there are your keyframes. So here's the change that we made. And again, we can go ahead and play this back. So you can see that it's going to fall a little bit slower now. Sweet. So again, that's a look at how to work with the retime tool. Something else I'd like to point out to you is how to clone your keyframes. It's really simple. It's just a matter of holding down Shift and dragging. Now, if you would like to clone a key and restrict its movement so it can only move in either time or value, here's what you would do. You would hold down Control and then Shift and then drag. So by holding down Control, we can either restrict the key's movement to only move in time as we drag left and right, or as we drag up and down, we can lock the movement of the key to only move in value. So you might find that to be super helpful. And then if you don't need the key, of course, you can just go ahead and remove it by highlighting it and hitting delete on your keyboard. Neat stuff. So in this lesson, we learned about the curve editor here in 3ds Max. We also took a look at a really cool tool for retiming our animations. Now in the following lesson, I'd like to show you pitch control. We can now go ahead and Alt-right click and choose Delete Selected Animation from our Animate Quad menu, and that's going to clear out all keys on selected objects. Now we can jump back to frame 0. With them still selected, we'll go back to our Animate Quad menu. Again, just simply Alt-right click. Let's go ahead and use Transform to 0 to make sure that we reset the two controls back to the neutral position. We could also turn off Auto Key so it doesn't create a keyframe when we make that change. Great. Alright, so let's go ahead and think about our cycle. Let's say we create an idle, and with that in mind, there are a few things we'll want to do to make sure the idle will look nice and polished. For one, we can make sure that we have keys on our start and end frames that are identical. So again, the pose on our start frame should match with the pose on our end frame, because that helps us to achieve a nice seamless blend when we exit the first key and when we cycle back through our first key. We can also make sure we work with a number that will give us a nice midpoint. So in this case, we can use, let's say, 32 frames, which gives us a midpoint of 16, because this all helps to, again, keep the fluidity nice and even, very fluid. So let's say we go ahead and get started. Now, I'd like to show you a way you can edit your active time segment without having to go to your time configuration panel. If you were to go ahead and hold down Control, Alt, and drag with the left mouse button, you'll notice that we can use that to adjust the start of our active time segment. So we can start to add frames this way or remove frames at the start. And then if we were to drag with the right mouse button, holding down again Control and Alt, we can go ahead and adjust the end of our active time segment. Now with the middle mouse button, it'll keep this frame range, but it will allow us to slide through a number of frames. So if we have, let's say, 30 frames in this range, as we start to use the middle mouse button, we'll keep that same amount. We'll just refocus on a new segment. Alright, sweet. Let's go ahead and adjust our start frame so that it's on frame 0. So again, we'll hold down Control Alt and drag with the left mouse button for that. And then to adjust the end to 32, we'll use the right mouse button. Alright, nice. So now it's time to start animating. Let's go ahead and grab our swivel control. We'll turn on Auto Key to save some time. Let's go ahead and check our key filters. We can make sure we uncheck rotation and check position, since we're going to animate the up and down axis of the turret first. So we're keeping things clean. Now in frame 0, let's go ahead and use the Set Key button to create our initial key. We know that our last frame should be identical with the first, so we can hold down Shift and drag to frame 32 to clone our key. Nice, so now we can go to frame 16 and we can create a bop by simply dragging the turret down just a bit in the Z-axis. So watch this. When we hit play, take a look. Everything looks seamless. Cool. Then if you wanted to, you can push your value down a bit more by either going to the key on 16. You can right-click as well, go to your curve editor, grab your key for the position Z track. You can hold down Control and start to drag that down a bit more. And remember, when you go to View and turn on Interactive Update, you can see that change on the fly. So I'm going to drag this down just a bit more. Let's go ahead and play the animation back. Alright, so that's more noticeable. We don't want it to be too extreme, otherwise it'll look like something's wrong with the turret. But this looks good. Now, let's go ahead and add some rotation for a bit of follow-through, and here's where it gets a little bit trickier. So again, we'll go to frame 0. Let's go ahead and check our key filters. We'll go ahead and set this to rotation instead of position. Let's go ahead and create our first key. We'll hold down Shift and drag to frame 32. Nice. Now we don't want to create our poses on the same frames that we animated the swivel control on, except for, of course, our start and end frames. We need those anchors there. But any time in between those two frames, we want to create an offset for some follow-through and overlap. So what's great about this range is that we actually have sub-midpoints. There would be 8 and 24. So these are midpoints of our current midpoint, which is 16. So we basically split that again, and that's how we get those two frames. So we can start to use these to add some fluidity. Let's go ahead and head over to frame 8, and thinking about follow-through here as the main mass starts to move down, of course this attachment should move upward for a bit of drag. So we'll just go ahead and bring it up just a bit, not much at all, it should be subtle. I might go ahead and drop it just slightly. Great. And now, a really cool trick I like to keep in mind here is that once we create our pose on frame 8, we could actually mirror that on the mirrored frame, which we know is 24. So we can do that by first holding down Shift and dragging the key over to 24. And now when we right click on the key, take a look, we can get to its properties from here. We know we've been animating in the rotate X axis. We can go to the rotate X to get to our key info panel. Sweet. So now it's just a matter of flipping this value we see here of about -2. Let's set that to +2. We'll get rid of the negative operator, and there we have it. So now when we go to frame 24, this pose has been mirrored. Now when we play back the animation, you'll notice that there's a little bit of a pause, so it's not moving fluidly. So this is when it's time to cycle the animation, and you'll notice that when we do, we'll see the problem at hand and we'll know how to fix it. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We'll right click and go to the curve editor. Let's go ahead and focus in on our rotate X track, and that's going to be 0 Euler rotate X, not the rotate X in the frozen list, because that frozen list is not being used at this time. We clean this up to make sure that we can work with 0 values instead of these transform values here. Alright, sweet. So with the track selected, we can now go to Edit, Controller, and choose Out of Range Types. So by default, you'll notice that this is set to constant, meaning no cycle. Let's go ahead and choose Cycle, and then click OK. I'd also like to point out that if you'd like to turn off your cycle, simply go back to that property and switch it back to constant. Really simple. But take a look. Now we see how the animation extrapolates after our last key and before our first key. And this continues infinitely. This also shows us the problem why we're getting that pause. It's because of the keys right here on 32 and on 0. All we need to do is go ahead and drag our tangency so that the infinite curve blends into our actual function curve. And there you have it. So you'll notice now we no longer get that nasty pause. Everything is nice and fluid. How cool was that? Let's say we end this by cycling our position Z track on the swivel control, and then we'll go ahead and adjust our frame range so we can see that the animation truly cycles infinitely. So I'll go ahead and right click and access the curve editor. We'll focus in on our position Z track. We'll go to Edit, Controller, and choose Out of Range Type. So let's go ahead and set this to Cycle and choose OK. So take a look, there's no nasty pause here. So we're good to go. Let's now go ahead and use our new trick for adjusting our active time segment. To add more frames, we'll hold down Control-Alt and drag with the right mouse button. You can add as many as you'd like. Don't get too carried away, please. Alright, so now let's go ahead and hit play, and you'll notice that the animation will continue to play through. How exciting is that? So in this lesson, we learn how to create a seamless cycle here in 3ds Max. We also learn how to work with our tangents to fix any nasty pauses in our cycles. And if you'd like to learn more about this, feel free to take a look at Animating Walk and Run. Everything's playing back at the correct frame rate. This becomes even more apparent as we start to add more to our scene, as it starts to become heavier and we start to notice a lag. So if that's the case, here's what you'd want to do. You'd head over to Tools. From there you can choose Preview, Grab Viewport, Create Preview Animation. Here's the hotkey for that, by the way, Shift Y. So you'll notice that we can now go through and create a quick render, something that's low quality, but something that will show us the actual frame rate of our animation. This is a super important step. If you overlook it, you might find that your scene would get sent back to you because there are some corrections that need to be made that could have been avoided had you have taken this step. So make sure to create these previews. So we can go ahead and preview our active time segment or a custom range. I'll go ahead and leave this at the active time segment so we can take a look at the entire animation. We also get to choose how many frames get rendered out. So right now this is set to 1. What if we wanted to render every third frame? Well, we'd have this set to 3 instead. And here's our frame rate here. Sweet. We also get to choose our image size. So right now this is set to 100%. And this is a pretty small resolution, but again, we don't need a large display here since this is just a preview. Also keep in mind your display filters over to the right. So if you wanted to hide any shapes or geometry, you can do that from here. You also get to choose your rendering quality or the visual style. I like to have realistic on so we can see those nice shadows that are cast in 3ds Max's viewport. So these are those options. If you want to compress your preview, just go ahead and work with the output section here. So you can go ahead and click on your compression type and adjust that value as needed. So I find that 70% works well. We can now click OK, and there you have it. Also very important, make sure that you set your camera at the very bottom. So right now mine is set to the shot camera in this scene. So you do that here. Wonderful. So at this point we can go ahead and click Create. And you'll notice that 3ds Max is going to create a quick render in the background. This is a great way to study the animation as well as it plays back slowly to look for any issues you might want to correct. I'll go ahead and pause the video, and when I come back we'll have a look at our preview. And here it is. So again, as you can see, this is pretty low quality, but this gives us a great idea as to the actual frame rate of the animation, just to make sure that we know for certain that our timing is well before we hand our file off. Fantastic. Now if I were to go ahead and close this out, let me go ahead and show you how to access the preview. You can go back to Tools, grab Viewport, and take a look. Here you can go ahead and play the preview, or you can choose to open the preview folder. So go ahead and open it up, and it'll go to your previews directory. Let me go ahead and bring this over to the side. Alright, sweet. So here's the preview, and here's what it's named. Now do keep this in mind. Once you rename your file, you cannot use this option here to play back your preview. But other than that, I mean, you could always just go to the preview folder, and from there you can go ahead and access all of your preview sequences. And then you can go ahead and save it out if you'd like. It's just going to go ahead and open up that same previews directory. Cool. All right, so again, in this lesson, we learned how to create a real-time preview of our animation so that we can avoid the hassle of redoing work, right? We would use these previews to check and make sure all is well. And if not, we'd go ahead and make corrections, but if so, we've done our job. Set our animation preferences. We learned of a few ways we can create keyframes. We also learned about the dope sheet, which is a great tool for polishing our timing. And then from there, we learned how to reverse an animated sequence. Super cool. Then we learned how important the curve editor was. We learned how we can use it to polish our work by adjusting our tangents, adjusting our function curves until we manage to create a high-end performance. And then to wrap up the course, we learned the importance of creating previews just to make sure everything is playing back at the correct frame rate. So we have no surprises, right? So with that, what I'd like you to do is go ahead and create an idle with this turret until you understand the tools that we've covered in this course. And then you can go ahead and take it a step further from there. If you'd like, you can go ahead and do something that would involve another action, perhaps a jump, if you will. But just get used to these tools so that you can start to use them creatively for even greater performances. So with that, I'd like to